So funny enough, before I really get into this, a buddy of mine I know, IRL, actually recommended me this manga after he saw my Insomniacs After School video, and where he basically said, hey, you might actually like this a lot, but just a quick warning, this is actually much darker than that initial story, but I know your taste, so you'll probably enjoy this. So I'm like, you know what, I trust the guy. And after some time, I found myself like a good time out of my day so I can actually read it, and I read up to 32 or so chapters right now. So yeah, there's a lot to say about it, but right now let's give a quick summary and actually get into it a bit more before I deep dive into the nitty gritty, okay? Alright, so Boys Abyss focuses on our MC, Reggie, and like your average individual, nothing like that special about him. He goes to school, he has his friend, he is in this very small town, and you do get a sense that like that's just his normal routine. But the first chapter does a good enough job of somewhat seeding the tone and the main through line of the manga, in that people who stay in this town tend to stay for life, and not out of any supernatural sense or any like dark sense like that, but rather that everyone in a way has their secrets, everyone feels need of control in some sense, and everyone there has this very odd dark sense of community in a way that's somewhat underlying. This isn't explicitly stated in chapter 1, but this is very hinted at and is shown later on throughout the manga, that people who have even left the town and have never came back are generally resented in some aspects. But this isn't shown till the later chapters in the series. But in chapter 1, we do get a good sense of that though, reading back into it. So continuing where I left off with Reggie, one day he sees a cashier that actually looks a bit familiar. Turns out, she actually is. She's a pop idol that he recognizes. And one day he actually goes to talk with her, and he does see her hand some food to what seems like a homeless person, who we will get to in a bit. The homeless guy leaves and he walks up to her. They actually have a discussion. They talk about life. They talk to get to know each other some more, like what they like, what their dislikes are, their thoughts on the town and so on. And then they reach a certain point like in the town called Lover's Abyss, I believe. And just as you think this was going to turn into some kind of forbidden love or somewhat of a silly rom-com story, the cashier asks RMC, has he ever considered suicide? Yeah, it's going there. And that the reason why he actually considers this is because Lover's Abyss is actually a place where infamously a couple have killed themselves in this lover's pact, and that she likes the idea of doing something similar to that. Now, there is a reason why she does have thoughts of suicide, and that's because she feels that her life is empty and that there's no real reason for her to live. And in some sense, Rijay kind of feels the same way. So he somewhat agrees, somewhat reluctantly. You get a sense that he's very conflicted on this, but you also see that he also does not like his life in this particular town. He does not like how things are actually going for him. And it isn't explicitly stated, especially now, where I am right now in the manga, there's something off about his home life, especially with his mom. It's not shown to us yet, and I'm not going to get into it, but there definitely seems to be a lot more that we do not know about this character. But moving on, the two actually go to her apartment and they have sex, surprisingly enough. And then I remember this is a more mature manga. This is not a shoujo. This is more of a seinen manga. It's clearly dealing with more heavy or more adult themes, so it having sexual content was a bit of a shock to me, but regardless of that. Also, it never felt like it was pornographic in a way, if that makes sense. It actually felt like it was part of the narrative. It actually felt like an old seinen that you would read in like the 80s or 90s, where they will have explicit content and such. And afterwards, after the two finish, the homeless guy from earlier actually shows up, and turns out he's actually the girl's husband, which is kind of funny. But we do learn more about that character as the series goes on. So MC learns this, he skedaddles, he leaves, and it's kind of messed up throughout. They meet up the next day, him and the girl, and they talk, and she actually tells him her relationship with her husband. It's clear that the two are not in the best of terms, and it's quite clear her husband doesn't exactly care that she slept with somebody else. So it's quite clear that this relationship is not the typical marriage that you would actually think that it is. And upon hearing this, the two do try to follow up on their little plan to take their lives, But they are actually stopped by one of Reggie's teachers, who is also a major character in the story. And when she stops him, she takes Reggie into her apartment for a bit, takes a shower, and she basically tells him, hey, why are you doing this? There's more to life than this. You don't need to take your life. And it's quite clear the underlying themes of the manga do show themselves, and it's clear that the teacher is somewhat the source of hope, that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that whenever we see her, the story seems to brighten up a bit. Just because something gets worse doesn't mean you have to give up. You can try, get up on your own 2 feet and make it work. You can push forward. That seems like a good underlying theme, and it's quite clear that the manga not at all is glorifying suicide, like at all. It's quite clear there is more to the story than what we're actually shown initially, which is good, which was my biggest concern when I read that first chapter. But as the series goes on, it's quite clear it doesn't do that, as far as I'm concerned. Whether or not it continues to do so as the series progresses is yet to be seen, but right now I'm talking about what I've read so far, and what I've read so far is actually pretty well done in some aspect, and I think it's handled very maturely, even though I do kind of roll my eyes at some things, like the MC actually ends up in a somewhat of a relationship with the teacher as well. Those two end up having sex. I'm not joking. It's kind of hilarious. I'm not joking. I won't lie. I actually roll my eyes when the two actually had sex for the first time, but other than that, the story continues, and we are given other characters' perspectives in this little story. We're also shown that it's clear that everyone has their secrets in a way. Everyone has their own reasons of staying, their reasons of leaving this town, and that it's almost like a light curse in a way. Well, not in a supernatural sense, but rather in a figurative sense, that you're not exactly allowed to leave. Because another character, a friend of the MC, like, her plan is to go to a college in Tokyo, but her parents find out and they say, no, you're not going to do that. You're going to go to a college near here or associated with the school you're going to now, or we're cutting your funding. We're not going to support you financially. And that ends up destroying her for a bit. But she and the MC do still plan on leaving. They just have to change up their strategy. Almost a couple of chapters afterwards, we're given a pretty massive revelation with Reggie, our main character's mother, and her relationship with another character's father, which I will not explicitly state, and I will not go into massive spoilers. You have to read it. And that revelation actually makes things even more complicated for him, and that leaving the town cannot be just that simple, and that his actions will affect other people, and these sacrifices that other people have made for him, or people that he loved, will essentially just be for nothing, which I will say I was actually shocked to read, and it is nice to see how the story unfolds. And I do look forward to reading some more and see how much further this messed up little rabbit hole actually goes on. So yeah, those are pretty much my thoughts on Boys Abyss right now. It is really grim. I am enjoying it quite a bit. It is not edgy or overly serious. It doesn't feel too try-hard at all. It feels like it takes the subject matter very seriously. I never really felt like it was just glorifying the subjects that it was talking about. Be sure to give this a read when you can, and if you have read it, be sure to let me know whether or not the story gets even more grim or more crazy, or if there are more twists ahead of time, or that the series eventually turns into complete edgy nonsense, which I hope it doesn't. From the looks of things, it doesn't seem to go that way, but yeah, sure to avoid hard spoilers, just letting you know. But yeah, those are pretty much my closing thoughts. I'll catch you guys later. Stay chill, Wanderers.